Well, hello once again, guys. This is new DM Ariel, and I know it's been a while since I dropped a video on Dungeons and Dragons or anything else. Today, I was looking back at my old videos and realized that I haven't really talked about Dungeons and Dragons First Edition or any other editions really outside of Fifth Edition for quite a long time because 5e is so popular and that's what we're all currently playing. But I have been taking some time more and more to look at familiarize myself with different rule sets, especially the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition rule set, which actually First Edition was the very first set of rule books that I bought um, and that I examined when I fell in love with the RPG hobby and with the Dungeons and Dragons specifically back in the day. And I've been looking at Gary Gygax's core books, the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Manuals, of course, all the first edition modules or materials, game settings that I own, because I was kind of disappointed the last time I ran 5e campaigns. I think 5e is pretty good as a player, but I've been running an ongoing campaign, and I wrote about this a little while ago. I posted on my blog. See if I can bring that up now. Um, so there's um, a blog post that I made not too long ago, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the gist of it is when I talked about how I feel that um, combat is broken in fifth edition. Um, this is my Nexus of Geek blog, and I was talking about how I think the 5e mechanics are kind of broken, and the reason I think that, and I'm disappointed with running games, is that I don't see any way around um, as a DM, and maybe you guys can correct me, some of you that are running games currently on 5e. Um, I have a set of players in the current campaign, for example, they're up to like level 7 now. They're seventh level players, and I talk about this on the post. And basically, I kind of preface it by saying that I'm not really a grognard or one of these people that are like so into OSR that I don't think that the new systems are good or anything like that. It's just that I noticed the same pattern happens that when the combat the way the combat is set up on a turn basis for 5e, especially if we have a big group of players. They might not even be like super experienced, but depending on the variety of classes and all the powers that they have, including spellcasters as well as melee fighters, I find that it doesn't really matter. I guess the way I could put it is it doesn't really matter that much if you have a monster, or let's say you're fighting an adversary, a monster, and the threat, their their CR is like 1 or 2 levels above the character. So, for example, they're seventh level characters, and in this one specific encounter I talk about in the blog, I talk about how they went up against a creature known as a, uh, a brog, brog. I think that's how you spell it. And a brog is basically kind of like a giant from the astral plane, and uh, it has like four arms, and it's kind of like throws rocks. One of his powers is like can really throw boulders at a great rate. It has multiple attacks too, but the reason why I say that I think that the encounters or the combat mechanics are broken is because even if you have just in this case the party was fighting one monster, but it could be 2 or 3 of these guys, similar CRs, um, and 1 or 2 levels. In this case, it was a 6 level CR6, and the party was only 1 level higher. But there are some, especially depending on the size. So I think I had like 5 or 6 players in the party. Plus, they have a couple of familiars that also get into the battle action. And so when you have that many players against one monster, the monster's not going to stand a chance, even if it has legendary actions or even if it has multiple attacks, because you simply is not going to have enough turns And depending on initiative, I remember we rolled for initiative and the monster rolled the lowest. So everybody was kind of hitting him. And by the time he got around to his turn to make even with multiple attacks, it was already considerably down in health. And I believe that in the older editions, this was not really a problem, especially on basic, because basic Gygax, the hit, it was balanced in terms of like the health for the characters, and and you could have multiple numbers come out. One thing I liked about the old monster manual, first edition monster manual, I think I have one laying around somewhere, and just to refer back to it, um, refer back to what it was like. I pick any random monster, like the purple worm, for example. There's a purple worm monster, and it's very rare. It's a rare monster, so you only get one or two appearing. But if you have more of a common adversary, especially something like kobolds, or I don't know, like uh, something that's not very uncommon, like a common type of adverse monster. Even like a fire giant, for example. If you're playing a fire giant, which is kind of uncommon, you could have between 1 to 8 of them appear at the same time, and it's random, and you roll for it, or it's up to the DM's discretion how difficult the encounter will turn out to be. But if you're fighting 5 or 6 fire giants with X number of hit points, and your party is only like 5, that seems like a more balanced encounter than what we have in a lot of the. Because even in 5e, even if you have multiple creatures attacking the party, it's the same thing. It's just gonna take longer because most of these creatures have multiple attack. But if you have depending on initiative order and depending on how strong the party is, because 7th level 5e characters are have a wider range of powers and abilities than other obviously lower level. So it just would take longer. I mean, you could fight 3 of these guys at CR6, and instead of them having like 85, averaging like 70 to 85 hit points, they're gonna have like a lot more hit points, but it's just gonna take longer for you to hit them, and eventually your party's still gonna come out on top. It's very rare, especially with the death mechanics, and that's one thing that I also, that I also mentioned in the blog here, where it talks about the health and dying problem, and I talked about how another problem with 5e, which has been well documented, and which I'm not really gonna rehash too much because it's been talked about over and over. I think I even talked about it. Is that um, uh, uh, it has to do with the relative ease by which the adventurer can heal and recuperate health. For example, if you have a cleric in the mist, the procedure is even easier. But let's say that the character is reduced to 0 hit points and fails its death saves, because it gets 3 death saves in 5e. This is pretty unlikely because the way the game is set up for recovery of health points versus permadeath, you're not gonna get. It's gonna be very hard to actually get the 3 deaths. Failing the 3 death saves, especially because if you get any type of heal, then it wipes all the fails out, and you start over again. So spells can always bring, and also spells can bring the characters back from the brink of death itself. So there's a lot of mechanics built into the system where death is pretty hard to do to begin with, and you add that to the kind of what I believe are broken combat mechanics, and it might be fun to play as a player if you're just role playing or if you're doing multiple encounters. But as if you're running a session and you're the DM and trying to throw more challenges at the players, then it can be kind of a drag, if you have this mechanic which doesn't necessarily, I feel, doesn't really necessarily work as per se. So I've been looking at first edition AD&D, and if you look at the players, I've talked about the player's manual for this edition once before, and I discussed some things like initiative, things like surprise and morale, things like that. But this, if you're looking for an older version, Gygax doesn't write the best manuals because he tends to be more verbose and rambles a lot, like I do. But yeah, he's a gamer. He's not really a writer per se of quality writing. But I do like the fact that This book in particular is very easy to pick up and easy to go through. I mean, it starts out with the character classes and the different character classes and character creation, and then after that, he goes into a little bit of a discussion about like weapons and armor class, and then he talks about henchmen, time in the campaign, and distance. And then like half the book, though, just about a big chunk of the book, actually more than half, actually maybe like 75% is oops, dropped some manuals. 75% is a dedicated to spells. So you got the different spells by the different spell casting classes. And it's not until the back of the book where you get to around page 101. And it's only like 100 and not even 130 pages. But you get to page 101 when he starts talking in general terms about the adventure. So he talks about things like encumbrance and light and movement in a dungeon. And he talks about traps, tricks, and encounters. And it does talk about the different types of adventures, like the indoors dungeons, outdoor exploration, and town adventures. But they're very light. They're like little nuggets, but one or two paragraphs because he went on to write entire books, source books about these type of topics for first edition. So this followed up with the Dungeoneer's Guide, and Unearthed Arcana and things like that. And I might talk about those in more detail in definitely after I finish familiarizing myself more with these source books. But so the point is, um, it's not very detailed, I think, on purpose. Then you get to the appendixes where it talks about psionics, which was a thing back in first edition, and it ends up with probably um, my favorite appendix of the whole thing, which is Appendix 4, the known planes of existence, where it talks about the different inner planes. Basically, talks about the D&D multiverse, the inner planes, the outer planes, the ethereal plane, the astral plane, and it has this really cool a maybe I'll add it to this video in post production, but it has this really cool map of the different planes of existence, and they've published these maps in like the um the the manual of the planes for first edition and other source books. But this was the first time I encountered it when I was playing the game initially when I was like 13 or 14. And I just love that. Like it gives me so much nostalgia to see that appendix and it talking about the planes of existence. And I really want to play first edition again. It's not the most um streamlined, and it's got a lot of tables, which just makes it kind of clumsy. You got to roll on tables, but so does fifth edition. I mean, there's some source books that are full of wilderness and exploration tables and random encounter tables. But let me know what you guys think about this topic. Do you think that the combat mechanics in fifth edition are broken and really put the DM in a disadvantage in terms of challenging the party, which I personally think that it does. But what do you guys think about it? And excuse me, how do you guys deal with the issue? I'd really like to get some feedback on the comments about that. So that's all for now. I will do a further exploration of first edition as I get reintroduce myself more and more into the older systems. I'm planning to do a review or an exploration of the Castles and Crusades, which is a system that's kind of like second edition combined with a little bit of third edition mechanics, um, and but mostly like it's kind of like advanced Dungeons and Dragons combined with like some of the best parts I think of 2E and some even some 3.5. So I'll go over that one in a later time. But thank you so much. That's all for now, and enjoy playing whatever version of Dungeons and Dragons you like, and I'll talk to you guys soon.